I Don't Know Yet is not affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. The content put forth are the thoughts, opinions, and experiences of the host and guests. It is meant to be suggestive only and is in no way a reflection on how to work the steps in any fellowship or how to work any other recovery program. Okay, we are back. I'm very excited to bring back Janine. Welcome.
Thank you.
We got into a lot of really great content last episode and we ran out of time way too fast. So I'm really excited that we're doing back-to-back episodes. We started talking about just a lot of things that newcomers need to know, would like to know, things we wish as newcomers that we knew. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to just plow through a whole bunch of stuff. So don't need a whole lot of intro. If you are unfamiliar, go back and watch the last episode pretty much.
Let's start where we were just talking before we started recording here. Do you want to start from the beginning of that little story with your solitary self-appraisal?
Oh, yeah, the solitary self-appraisal. So I had run into a situation in a meeting. I took my birthday at a fellowship and I had just done a 10 with someone in recovery. They did one with me about an individual that was causing them what they felt some unneeded harm. And so sitting in the meeting, it was interesting. What was really cool about that whole experience is I had my boyfriend on my left because I was taking my birthday, and I had just a beloved person that I just adore in recovery on my right. And my eyes made path and saw the person causing this person that I care about some harm. And so this lady sitting next to me, she's just like, "Whoa, are you okay?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Your energy just shifted way down." And I was like, "You can tell that?" She was like, "Yeah, are you okay?" And I'm like, funnily enough, like not like I'm trying, but I'm shooting daggers at somebody right now, which is I'm trying not to because I'm trying to also be spiritual. But I have this mama bear protective instinct when someone's causing harm that is behind false truths, right? So there was that. During the meeting, another friend in recovery, turns around and starts telling me a story about what they're going through and how this person is negatively affecting them in the rooms. And I'm just like, this double dose of this like mama bear instinct wanting to protect my cubs, right? Because I know these people on deep personal levels. They've opened up to me about a lot of stuff. And so I understand that there's always three sides to every story, right? But everything that I'm hearing, I'm like, that's just unnecessary, what's happening. And it's hard to remember sometimes that people are fallible and people make dumb fucking choices sometimes. So now I am sitting with these two resentments. I called my sponsor to chat, and he was unavailable for a while. So I tried to do the self-appraisal, temporarily, just like trying to break it down like I would if I was offering a tent to someone else, which I just think it's so funny that you just can't when it's you. Yeah. When you're emotionally tied to it, you are just blocked from all logic. And I was like sitting there and I'm like, resentment is normally tied to fear. Okay, am I fearful? Like, am I worried about their recovery or what's going to happen to them? And I'm like trying to break it down. I'm like, well, not really. And so finally he was free and he called back and we started chatting. And so I told him about two scenarios and I'm just like, I'm angry. I am angry at these people. How dare you do that? Why would you do that? Do you not see how stuck in self you are and how like this is unneeded harm? How dare you? And so I'm just like, I'm stuck and I'm like, I'm trying to break it down. I'm trying to figure it out. And I just I can't see it. So just tell me. And he said something so profound. He was like, you're making it sound like you think that you're failing. And I'm just like, I probably am. Like, what do you mean? And he was just like, you're making it sound like if you have any resentments at all or find anything or catch anything that you're not actually working your program. And I'm like, well, that's exactly what I think, because my defects of like not wanting to fail so bad. I just want you to love me. I want you to like me. I want you to accept me. I really believed that if I was working this thing 100% to the best of my ability, I wouldn't get resentments.
Like serenity is success.
Right? Yeah. And what's fascinating is I don't pair those two together when it comes to fear. I know fear comes up. I'm always going to have fear come up. I know what to do when fear does come up. which is very along the same plane with the step 10 of the resentments. But my brain just didn't give me any room for that. I'm like, if I've created one, then I've missed something. And so he did a really great job of being like, you know that you're human, and you know that the book specifically says when these crop up, not if these crop up. Like, it's getting mad is a part of life. Getting angry at someone is going to happen. It's how you deal with it from there. And it's just so funny, like, just to this day, the simplest things, I overcomplicate everything. Give me the most complicated thing that needs a solution and I can figure it out lickety split. But something simple, I can never see it. I'm like, wait, so you're telling me I am doing a good job and this is okay? And he was like, you recognized it right away. And within a few hours of recognized it, you reached out for help. That's literally what you're supposed to do.
Literally. Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, like 5 years have I been working this. And it never, ever occurred to me that that was okay.
And it's like it throws a person off sometimes because as you get further along, you don't actually get shaken up so much with like all the resentments that a person comes in with. There's so many. It starts there and everybody's mad at everybody and then it's like, wow, I'm actually full of fear. And then you live there for a bit and you kind of develop the love and tolerance is the code thing. It just becomes because you're losing interest in all the little plans and designs of everybody else. And then when you get a resentment, it's like, whoa, this is what is this indicating? But would you say like how would you describe the ability for a person to learn like emotional intelligence within the rooms?
Oh my gosh, what a question, Janine.
Sorry. It's always on my mind, I guess, just from like my work life.
The only, and like, I don't know if this is right, wrong, or indifferent, but the way I gained emotional intelligence was by reaching out for absolutely everything. Nothing too big, nothing too small. If I'm not feeling really good, talk to someone else, period. Because there's a lot of things that I do, like in not reaching out to someone, my brain has a great tendency to justify, rationalize what I'm thinking, and that, that addictive, broken part of the brain. And it only took me 4 or 5 phone calls years and years ago to identify the big ones out there and being like, oh, so every time I think that's just the addict brain doing its thing.
Yeah. But
without reaching out and being, shown this stuff, I think it's a lot harder, which is why you're going to see a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people that have several years that don't really reach out for those types of things. It's not surprising that their character kind of reflects that in a lot more ways. You can really tell the people that have the humility, that have the spirituality, that are just calm and centered all the time. It's because they're constantly not trying to solve the answers in their own head. They're reaching out.
Well, the intellectualism is like that's the ego, and it cuts you off because you're not getting anywhere near your heart. It's like you're taking it all on, trying to figure it out, and it's kind of got a omnipotent vibe with that, like I'll solve it myself. And that I used to be extremely bad with that. That was probably why I didn't get it the first time. I would say like I was trying to always solve something and I couldn't just be, and it had to be like, but why and but why and but why. And when you're trying to match the spiritual realm with logic, it's like you come up short, especially when you're brand new and you don't know. I didn't know what was going on. So I remember an old timer was saying to me, like, you're too smart to get it. And I was like, what do you mean? And it was really annoying. I was annoyed. And I just thought that it missed so much and the program fell short, and they weren't. I also lived in a community that didn't really like talk about the actual steps, so that it was lost on me what 6 was and 7 was and 10 was and so on and so forth. So it's hard to actually like get the program. But I really tried, and I tried by like solitary self-appraisal through reading it. And although it was like a good read and I agreed with a lot of it, I was like, this isn't good because it falls short. Like, how are we supposed to? And I had so many like arguments that I should have been having with other people, but like people don't want to tackle it out, you know, like there
Mhm.
wasn't a lot of women that wanted to really have these conversations. And I don't think I was like extra nice about it either. So, I mean, now when I picture, you know, somebody who I see in a different role, like in my work setting, and they're struggling, and it's like so obvious that they need a solution, and I feel so passionate about the solution here. And there's like all the answers that they say why they don't come are the things that I used to say, right? Like it's the people are annoying and everybody's way too happy and everybody's like, but one lady brought up this whole emotional piece, and she said, I don't feel like it. And this is the only time I've ever heard that. And once it really stood out, because I was like, yeah, like she goes, I don't have a way to process my emotions the right way. And I said, like, what do you mean? And she said, well, like when I'm mad, like that indicates to me that there's something I need to do and there's something to be done. Or like when I'm afraid, that it's like there's some sort of something, like, so basically I was picturing it like lights on a dashboard indicating like what you're supposed to be doing. And so I think that that's what the emotions are for, is to inform us on like where we're supposed to be going. Like, oh, this didn't feel good, I need to adjust, right? But I used to adjust in all the wrong ways. Like it's like, oh, what do I need to change so that you're not treating me like this? So
Right.
I'd be adjusting the wrong thing, because I'm supposed to be adjusting in the outer world so that I'm not feeling the like urgent check engine. And so anger is like a light on the dashboard is how I see it now. And there's an action step, and it's almost always been that I'm supposed to say something, that I'm not actually saying something. And I was actually researching this because I got a resentment at like year 2, and I was living with someone who was like a really, really close friend, and we're both busy, and so we were texting, and we'd go. He had mentioned like, I'm gonna split utilities. I think that that's fair because da 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 da, and I didn't acknowledge it. Like I barely even saw it. Like I forgot until 3 months goes by, and then I'm like, why am I paying so much utilities? And he's like, well, because we agreed to go 50-50 because of da da da, all the reasons. And then I was like, well, shouldn't we have had a conversation? So just that. And it was like less than $200. Okay. So I'm like sitting here with this major resentment, and I couldn't figure it out. Like I was like, why am I so mad? Just give him the money. And then I'm like, no, that's not the right thing to do, because that's what I always do, is I just try to make the problem go away, and like whatever I need to do to appease you, even if I don't agree with it. So I was stuck. Like I was like, I'd moved over, like I was moving out, and this was kind of around the time that I was moving anyways. So this resentment like clouded everything. Like it and I don't know like what he's pretty chill, so I don't know what he was feeling on his end. But here I'm like fuming about like nothing. And I'm really going like into detail in my mind about all these conversations that we should have had, and why didn't we, and how could he, and like I really had it going pretty good. And I'm like not wanting to have it. Like I didn't want to have the resentment in the first place, and I recognized it was so petty. And so I was like really getting this lesson in, I can't remove it when I want to, because I was like praying for, and I was talking about this resentment with like a pillar, and I just kept it with one person just because we had like mutual friends and stuff. And it was like, well, they were giving me solutions, right? But didn't feel like the solutions. Like it was like, well, just, you know, sometimes do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Do you want to, like, sometimes the price of a lesson is this or whatever. And I was really looking at my part where I should have stopped and acknowledged it and addressed it. And why wasn't I like paying attention to my bills in the first place? Like, why was I being like lazy about that? And I shouldn't have had just that type of attitude anyway. So I had all those things, and it's like, but still I couldn't just like get on board with, well, just send the money. It didn't feel right. So then I end up 2 months later, we've like barely spoken. I've moved out, and I'm still like super resentful and justified in it, but like not wanting to have it and praying for it to be removed. And like I was truly willing, and I couldn't get an angle. And it didn't matter that I was like talking to Pillar and like a friend that was in Medicine Hat. But I was like trying to talk it through. I was trying to get a perspective. I was trying to take the feedback, but it wasn't feeling right. And so one day I was like unloading the dishwasher, and I thought about just like how we lived together for like a long time, like almost 2 years, I think. And we never ever got in a fight. And like, it was just always so easy. And like, I was just like, I really appreciate him. You know, like I was like, he was so good. We just like, what a good situation that was. And I was just, all of a sudden I was like so grateful at like just how, and without like our friendship, I wouldn't have gotten like to Calgary, because that was like, he's like, well, why don't we do this? Then you can like rent the basement of this house. And that felt like a comfortable first step. And it wasn't like this huge plunge. And he's a really reassuring friend. And I just was just overwhelmed with all this gratitude. And I was like, why am I doing this? I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden it hit me, and it was like, you can pay the money and communicate that you don't agree. And it was like,
bing.
So I thought, okay. And I guess to also add that I had been researching about why I couldn't get over this resentment, and where does resentment come from anyways. And I was looking at like what the like data says, like in science world and psychology land. And so what I was concluding actually was that if you have a resentment, it's like there's an action to take, unless it's like those things that are unjustified or that are justified, like a drunk driver kills your child or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's like somebody is telling you, I'm on your boundary, you know, like, or there's something that's happened that you have to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't seem right to me, because I was thinking about how, like, with my mother-in-law, who I get along with and love today, but there was a time when everything she said, I was like, and I wanted to speak up, but I feared that by speaking up, I would have extra drama, extra conflict. She wasn't going to change anyway. So what's the point? And there was all these beliefs around like, what's the point? I don't want the drama. I don't want the enemy. I don't want that conversation that goes nowhere and just makes it even worse than it is now. And so I was trying to like,
I'll just accept it.
Yep.
And then everything will be fine.
And I was raised with that, like the church vibes.
Actual avoidance being covered up as acceptance.
Turn the other cheek, be kind to your enemies, you know, like, but the other half of that I've taught my kids is that you turn the other cheek, you be kind to your enemies, but you don't go back into the same type of situation. You adjust and you put the distance in that you need to be able to like feel okay, because like you don't tolerate that stuff, but you forgive. You don't sit there, and you have to do both to make it like a actual peace. Otherwise you're avoiding, and it's like spiritual bypassing, you know, which is a whole nother subject. So anyways, I was thinking about the stuff that I had learned through what I was researching, and I was like, okay, so according to this, I'm supposed to communicate this, pay the money, and that should alleviate the resentment. I was like, that seems so bogus. Like, it is so counterintuitive to what I would have ever done, because I felt like, because I felt I was right, and I would send the money, and then I'd be even more mad, because now I know that I'm not right, and I sent the money, and I caved in on myself with my people pleasing shit. And then, you know, like, and so I really feared that. And that's an emotion that is probably the hardest for me to experience, is anger. Like it was a trigger for using, and it's like the most uncomfortable by a landslide. I'd rather be any of the other things, I think. And so I was very, very nervous to send the money, but I'm like, this is what I think it's supposed to be, because I'll tell you, the solution of like not people pleasing, all that did was put 2 months of distance, and we weren't communicating, and I missed him. And like, I was like, why are we not talking? Because like that, there was no reason. And so I sent the money, and I also had left some stuff in the garage. And so I also said sorry about that. And I sent him some money for like the stuff that I had left in the garage. And then I was like, I'm sorry that it took me so long to get to this. Like, I should have given you this right away, because like I had a part in this, and I had a lesson to learn here in that. And I shouldn't have, like, I had things to do that I could have not had this happen. Right. So I should have just given you this money, but I didn't see it, and I'm seeing it now. And I hope that it's not too late. And I hope that like we can like resume our friendship or whatever. And then he messaged back. He's like, yeah, come over for supper on Friday. And I was like, and anyways, so I said, and I still don't agree with how that went. And that's all I said. And that felt like enough. Cause like, he knew I didn't agree. I'd already said like, this is, why is this happening? I don't feel like, how did we get to this? Da, 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 da. So he knew I didn't agree, but I just like, I communicated that by me sending the money didn't mean that I had just said, okay, fine. It was me sending the money and saying, because I had a part and I still don't agree, but like, I'm over it because like, this is the right thing to do.
Right.
And then I was like, and I became like convinced in the stuff I had been reading because I was like, wow. So then I took that, and I think that was probably like the catalyst to like begin to heal my relationship with my mother-in-law. And that, like, there was a time that I remember, this is before I had my little guy with him, like her grandson, but I thought there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to like repair this relationship. It was so damaged, and there was so much resentment and so much like misunderstanding. And yeah, and I remember I was like, this is hopeless. This was part of the reason that I chose to like end that relationship, is that it just seemed so insurmountable. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to apply this to this. And I had to talk to her quite a bit when she would like sometimes meet halfway to take my son. And so she was still in my life and going to be. And so I thought I might as well, because it's awkward. It's awkward because we're like kind of polite, but there's so much to be said. And then when we start talking, then I'm going to have to really start saying the things, and we'll see what happens. And so I just started really slow. We met at McDonald's, and I just took it really slow because it's like, I wasn't in good practice of like just speaking up. It's like, yeah, just speak up. It's like, oh, it's not that easy. It's like you really fumble for a while, and it takes like a lot of practice, and you like, it's like the video game where you level 1's all right, okay, good, and then you're on 2. And so I used to be very, very beginner, and I just started taking it slow, and with things that I thought that I could say, that I could communicate in a way that she still like could receive it and respect me and respond, which it's a tricky combination. And so it was like very basic things, but we started to build from there. And then I was starting to say like, I didn't appreciate that comment, or like just really small things. And then it actually opened up more conversation, and I applied like seek to understand to that. And like, I learned a lot of things. And she just lost her mom like this last week, and I was able to like communicate with her back and forth through text, and just kind of like support in the best way that I could. And that's like, it was a miracle. I wanted to text her and be like, I just can't even believe that you're talking to me about this. Like, how honored I am that, and grateful and amazed that we're having this conversation. So it's like, it's a big thing with resentment, because that idea that by talking was going to cause more damage is why I never talked, and the relationship never changed. And so in like navigating the resentments that were safer to in early recovery, and like since I've been in Calgary, like it has built the video game levels up to the like place where I'm like, yeah, I can take this on. And it's been like that. And and so like, without learning about this resentment, I wouldn't have been able to kind of go in and have these other conversations. So anyways, circling back to this lady who was talking about the emotions, that one, I like, it's clear, and it's the only place that I can see that tackles resentment. Like, so when I'm working with someone and they're resentful, it's like they're telling me they're depressed. And I'm like, well, you're actually like not eating because you're Of course, that feels like depression. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to, like, a lot of the things I hear people describing as like a depression or an anxiety is like a high conflict divorce, or, you know, a custody battle, or someone in their family's using. And I want to send them to like what we've had, because resentment is the number one thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just that it's interesting about like thinking about the emotions. That's why I asked you about, besides the fear and the resentment, can you think of anything in your recovery like specific around the positive emotions, or any of the ones that we don't often talk about?
Can you give me an example of what you're asking?
Yeah, like I guess when you feel disappointed or abandoned or rejected, or like the range of emotions, would you say that we do a good job with that, or that we even need to? I guess, like, I know that's a loaded question, but I'm so curious. I've never asked this to anybody around what their take on their emotional world. Like, how has your emotional world healed
from the steps?
Yeah.
Literally night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what direction that you were going, but I think I understand where you're
I
headed.
Wasn't sure either. I'm just talking this out. Yeah.
I think that it's a great reaffirming reminder for me of how broken my brain is. An addict's brain is broken. Everything. When I came into recovery, I was literally told, like, everything you think is wrong. And as soon as you accept that, then you have a starting point. Everything your brain tells you is a lie.
Yeah.
And so when I finally kind of admitted defeat to that and said, if everything I think is wrong, then what is the right way to think? And that's when I started to seek to understand and become more willing to follow the directions and the steps. But like I lived in a resentful, fearful, self-pity world my entire life. It's why drugs and alcohol gave me so much relief. And in doing the 4, which I think is actually going to be a great segue for us into one of our topics, is how to not bail on your 4. But in making small efforts to try to see that maybe I don't have all the answers, maybe how I'm reacting and feeling and thinking is not right, was one of the catalysts that helped me really attack my 4 and my 5. And as somebody who suffered from very low self-worth, self-esteem, lots of bullying, all that stuff, I heard all these rumors in the rooms about 4, as everyone does. And I just, like, my understanding before I went into 4 and 5 was that my sponsor was going to essentially hand me a list of all the things that are wrong with me, was my takeaway. And so as somebody that already thought low enough of myself, the idea of having someone show me on paper all the things that are wrong with me didn't sound appealing to me at all. And it's one of the reasons I sat on my 4 for a really long time. Having then still the willingness to go through with the process, I was absolutely delighted at the fact that I wasn't being handed a piece of paper that had all the things wrong with me. What I was being handed was a map to freedom. And, I lived a lot of my life. It's hard to think about it, remember, just the school years and the bullying, and maybe it wasn't even as bad as I thought it was. Maybe it was my broken addict brain, who knows? But there was a lot of really tough times where I remember just looking at other people laughing in school, having their friends, whether they were in the popular group or not, just being like, why me? Why are the rumors about me? Why is everybody talking about me? Why me? And so when I was, handed this map to freedom, is what I like to call it, I got to kind of give it a little more lighthearted and chuckle at myself. And I'm like, oh, well, that's why. That's why I've been struggling my entire life. Oh my God. Okay. Now I know now I know that I don't know anything. Now I know that I need to learn all this stuff. And I think that was really the start of where the emotional intelligence came from, is really seeing that I assisted a lot of my own failure. And that's where I really changed from the self-pity into the hope and moving forward. Is my life perfect today? God, no. Do I get disappointed? Often. Do I feel sad or somewhat depressed sometimes? Often. Do I lean into joy and celebrate love? Often. Often. Today is a much more... My life used to be like this. My emotions used to be like this. And in doing the steps, it turned into this. And continually working with others and continually working on myself, I feel it really starting to balance out. I feel those things, but they don't affect the rest of my life nearly as much as they used to.
So you're saying that when, before, there was a lot of turbulence that was out of your control. And since you've come into the rooms into recovery, and now you have like a really rich emotional life that you can like ride through and experience the lows and the highs, because hey, like if you're numbing out the lows, you don't get the highs either.
Exactly.
And it's just a numb spot. So
Yeah.
like truly you want to have like the pain. And I think I was thinking about that actually when you were talking at the beginning about just like getting kind of two stories at once and having like a feeling about that. And I was going to ask you at some point, so I'm glad I'm remembering now, but what's your, like, I guess your belief of struggle? So like when you see somebody struggling, and so I know that I just dumped a hard question again out of nowhere, but I'll give you some context.
This is supposed to be an easy episode about how to help newcomers, and you're just coming at me with all these fire questions.
I don't know why I am.
No, you know what? Like, that's how this conversation was meant to be.
Okay. I'll give you some context though, and some time to think about what I'm saying.
Oh, I already have an answer, but if you want to give me some context, then feel free.
Okay, like when somebody's struggling, and I used to just want to go buy them a sandwich and a pack of cigarettes, and like then maybe supper, and then loiter around and make sure they're okay. Like it would affect me so much to see like somebody homeless or like somebody struggling, and that was a problem. Like I had no, like I was powerless over that, like helping. It was like compulsive helping that really, and it caused a lot of problems for me, like in relationships and the type of relationships I would get into, and I would stay too long and invest too much, like it was, and that went across like with my kids and my friends. And so eventually, like I don't know where it's shifted, but I think like that's just one part of their it's like a paragraph of a chapter of a story. And like we don't get to have like the highs if we're not getting the lows to build the character.
Yeah.
And so like when I see that sort of thing, that's kind of like what I'm like, okay, well maybe we need to go through some experiences here so that these people like, and then I just leave it at that so I don't get all into it. And I don't know where or when that came up, but and I think I use that more in my like work life, because to separate and put a distance. So I'm just wondering like what the angle is for you.
With more context makes the question more loaded.
Oh.
To spend too much time on anyone's situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy, is one of the lines from Working with Others. And I totally understand what you're saying. I used to be the person that if somebody was struggling, I would people please the shit out of it, and just try to do everything in my power to help that person. Tyler came on. He's been on the show twice, and he spoke about this on one of the episodes. And I'd never looked at, I love analogies. My brain just loves them. And he had said something so profound in one of the episodes that I really use that often. And he talked about, if you want to grow and develop and get better, you have to imagine that God is like a personal trainer in the gym. And if you go to your personal trainer and say, make me strong, the personal trainer is not going to snap his fingers and give you muscle. He's going to give you weight and, motivate you to push through that weight. And in return, you build strength. And so when I see somebody struggling today, as hard as it is, and I don't want this to come across like I'm not a caring, hopeful individual for people, but based on the line out of the book that I've read, I've understood that it's not up to me to push the weight. It's not. I can be there to help motivate you to push the weight, but if you're not ready to pick up the dumbbells, I knew what you meant. If you are not ready to do that, then I'm literally just going to exhaust myself and then feel like I've failed you when you've been unwilling the entire time. So I used to do that. I used to people please, and I used to exhaust myself, and I'll give you everything, and then nothing, and then people were not being helped, and it would actually was sometimes made it worse. And I'm like, oh my God, like what do I do? And so I've come to have a peace within me that understands it's not mine to give. And I tell all my sponsees, I'm like, I can only match your effort.
Yeah.
I can give you my hand, but it's up to you to take it and walk with me.
Yeah.
As hard as that can be sometimes. But when I watch someone struggle, I will reach out a hand, but I can't run into the house and pull you out of the fire.
Yeah.
Right. You got to come out of I'll help run you to safety once you're out of it. But it's really, I remember being in treatment the first time in 2007, and like I sat through the classes and I checked off the lists, and I really thought that just by being there and doing what I was told, I would get well. And I didn't understand that it had nothing to do with what you learned inside the rooms. It was how you applied it outside the rooms. And I didn't apply any of that stuff. And the amount of people, most importantly, my family, who exhausted their efforts trying to help me when I was not able to be helped. Right? It wasn't until I made the decision to be willing and to do something different that my life changed. So I in the beginning, I would say it sucked to know that I wasn't all powerful and couldn't save people. But now I'll offer you a hand.
Yeah.
But if you don't take it, then like I'm going to turn. If I do a full 180, there's going to be 3 or 4 hands sticking out. And if it's not yours, then it's my job to grab someone's whose
100%,
is.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, it was interesting. I had like a minor, snapping moment a few weeks ago where I was it brought it all together for me. I've been seeing a bunch of posts from a bunch of people on Facebook, blasting other people, calling down other people, family, friends, loved ones, current boyfriends or girlfriends, exes, just like all of these things. And just, I can see their own character flaws and where they are being held back by themselves. And a part of me is like, I should reach out to this person. I should teach them everything that I know. I should help them get out of it. But the other part of me knows that when they're ready to get past that stuff, they're going to ask for help. So like these days, I kind of just keep to myself. And
so what was the line you read again? Can you say it one more time?
Yes. The one that I was thinking in my head was like, you might
squander the hours that could be useful.
No, that's from the resentment. I was thinking like, don't push too hard. You might ruin a chance to be helpful later. I can't remember exactly where that was.
But I liked what you read because that's what kind of we're talking about with all the hands.
Here's the whole thing for context.
Yeah.
Actually, quick sidebar, because I think this is hilarious. So I'll read it once for the funny, and then I'll read it again for the for the actual purpose.
Okay.
I just think it's funny. I listen to Joe and Charlie often. I love their tapes, and they talked about someone came up to them asking about how to correct their sex conduct.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, well, it's easy. It's not a coincidence. It's on page 69." So this person was told to go read this page, and that'll help them, give them kind of a footing on what to do with their sex conduct. They accidentally inverted the numbers and read page 96. So imagine you're a newcomer.
Yeah.
And you say, I need help with my sex conduct. And they tell you to read this. Don't be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you have to offer. I think that's hilarious. Okay. But all kidding aside, when it comes to me and my ability to help someone, it says, do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you have to offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. Mm-hmm. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy, but it brings me a lot more peace to understand that it's not my job to get people ready. It's my job to be there when they are.
Yeah, that reminded me of like a situation where I felt I was in the right and this person was really in the wrong. And I don't know what I think about it now, but I know for sure that I'm glad that I got some advice around this, because I wanted to say, kind of like in a kind way, I wanted to say, this is and basically take the whole inventory and expected that was going to be received. And I really thought that would be like a helpful thing because if you don't have an insight, then how are you going to change it? So I'll help you out and point it out. And that was actually my angle, was like, I think I should tell her. And so I talked to a pillar, and I was like, oh, and they're like, the teacher might be here, but the student's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, it's like, you're just right. And I was like, okay. And how many times do I want to just like do that in whatever, my kids, my teenagers, for sure. They're like, oh, okay. And it's a fine line of, not so much outside of my family, but I mean, it's a fine line in general to know when I should push and like try and influence, like what you're talking about on Facebook. It's like, do you be a person who like says something on Facebook, and then you're, you get the dialogue that we might not like, and I don't know if it's helpful arguing on the internet, but I do sometimes wonder, like when I scroll by stuff like that, it's like it's just to balance it, because all the negative out there, and it's like I feel like what's good, and if I'm just sitting here letting that all scroll by, I should put that into the universe to, but then it's like, but the same kind of rules apply, but so it goes back to, for me, like the attraction not promotion thing, because like me living a good life is far more meaningful, and it's not that I'm not contributing, and
right.
So I had to like really tell myself that, because it is true. It's like the way we live is far more important than our stuff on the internet, and people will be attracted.
Yeah.
And those who know you will reach out when they're in a student mode, and to love and tolerance, and not get caught up in like controversy, and you know, the traditions apply here. And like, I mean, the whole design for living, it's pretty miraculous. It solves all the things. And trying to explain that to your family. Have you explained?
Well, we'll get to that one, because I'm still trying to segue us back into 4, since we're talking about the resentment and the willingness and stuff. But like, what a great entry into how not to bail on your 4, because I really think the reason we lose so many people is because that 4 determines how willing you really are to look at yourself. 4 determines whether you're ready to look at those behaviors, right? If you are currently a sponsor trying to get someone through the steps, and you lose them on 4, please understand how normal that is. I wish somebody told me in the beginning. It wasn't until I lost 5 or 6 people on 4 that where they disappeared, before I asked someone else. And I had said, is it me? Am I doing it wrong? Do I not have the information correct? And they're like, nope, it's because most people aren't ready to actually sit down and look at this stuff and get ready to start pushing the weight. Why do you think people bail on their 4?
Yeah, that for sure. I think that any type of change, even if it's obviously in a good direction, it starts with loss. So it's more complicated than just, I'm going to change right now. It's like, I'm going to change, but there's all these other things that I haven't come to terms with yet. And so people move through the stages of change as they go. And I guess I'm trying to always work in that kind of framework, where if I see somebody who's not willing, we leave it. If I see somebody who's contemplative, how can I help and encourage the conversation to go in a way and maybe tip the scale? And like, this goes exactly in line with that, where it talks about in working with others, just exactly that, is you want to have these conversations at the right time, in the right way. And one of the things that I do in the 3, which I think is probably like, if I was going to vote on a favorite step, it would be that one. And I spend a lot of time talking about we're all the actors until we realize we're in a play. Yeah. And that's not just alcoholics. That's the whole planet. And everybody's an actor, and they can be all kinds of things. And that's like, if you can understand that right now, like, that's something that will help you, because it won't confuse you when people change on a dime, and it'll help you be more discerning when you are going into relationships, because that's, especially, everybody's an actor, best foot forward, right? But I talk about that, and then causing your failures. And I spend a lot of time talking about this idea that they come from us and they cause our failures, and that the defects come from like our brokenness essentially. And I explained that at first pretty lengthy actually, so that I can say this is the key to the kingdom, because you don't actually know what you're turning your will over. What's your will? It's like you don't really discover that.
Yeah, you learn how to do that in 4 through 9.
Yeah, so I guess I just do what was done for me. Was the buy-in was like when I realized, and I remember sitting in the treatment center and I was reading it, and it was like, we talked about this last episode, but the things come alive in a way like, doesn't matter how much you've read the book. And I was sitting there and I was like, the defects, they arise from us and they cause our failures. And that part about it arises from us and causes my failures, I was like, and I remember feeling like relief, and I was like hopeful, and I was like, okay, like if this is what it is, because I was stumped, and I was like, if this is like, if this will identify what's causing my failures, I'm all in. And I think like it doesn't matter how I present it or you present it, it comes back to, you know, the readiness and where they're at, and are they ready to take the plunge? Because
And while I think that's all incredibly true from both of our sides, I think that there is still something to be said. I don't know. I was offered tips and tricks, right? It wasn't offered up to me, but when I started to really struggle with the 4 and I sat on it for a really long time, I asked for help on like, how do I push through it? And I have since asked people, I'm like, what do you offer? Like, what do you do? Like, I'm curious. And I've been given just a whole bunch of information from different people. I have people that advise their sponsees to light a candle before they start, asking God to help them pull out of them what's needed for this sitting. Set a timer so they're not thinking about this stuff for too long during the day. When the timer is gone, blow the candle out, say thank you, help me leave it on the paper.
I like that one.
I really like that one. I was always told, depending on your personality, I was told based on you and how intense you are, I don't recommend that you be a person that try to do this in like a 2-hour sitting. I recommend you break it up, because I was just very self-pity, very, very just blah in myself. And it got to a point where I actually like when I was trying to, when the big ones come out, because you think about them all the time, right? But when you're trying to be thorough, I just started scrolling through Facebook, looking at names, and every once in a while I'd be like, oh yeah, that should definitely be on there, right? Or it's like somebody I owe an amends to. But yeah, I found that doing it in smaller bits, but like having someone to be accountable to. My sponsor was like, hey, like I want you to start resentments, you know, let me know in a week how you're doing. I think I sat on it for like 5 months. Like eventually she called and she's like, what's the holdup?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And there was a piece of I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm working my butt off, I don't have time for this. There was a part of you know, the lack of willingness to physically write things down, because I don't journal. I'm like one of the only recovered people I know that doesn't. I don't like writing. I just don't like it. Finding all of these things that I'm struggling with. And then we uncovered one that I was unaware of. So if this is helpful for anyone else, I sat on mine for a really long time because I had convinced myself that if it wasn't, I don't want to use the word perfect. I had convinced myself that if I wasn't absolutely thorough for everything, the entirety of my entire life, the miracle wouldn't work. And then I would therefore fail and end up in jail and back out where I was. So when my sponsor had called and she's like, what is the holdup? Like, don't give me the surface level bullshit. Like, why are you not getting this done? And that's when that came up. And I said, because if I don't do it right, it's not going to work and it's not ready yet. And she had bestowed upon me the most beautiful thing. One of the most beautiful gifts she ever gave me is explaining to me, she's like, when was the last time you added someone to your list? And I'm like, I don't know, like a month ago. She's like, okay, God only gives you what you can handle. Nothing more, nothing less. If you haven't had anyone new to add to it, then you need to move on. Because here's the thing. This isn't the only inventory you're ever going to do. You're treating it like it has to be the entirety of your life. And I'm like, but you don't understand. I don't even remember what happened in 2016. I must have done some shit wrong there. Like, I don't even remember that year. I still struggle with a lot of stuff from 2016. So she was very clear, and she's like, you need to just be thorough about what you know right now. If or when God is ready to provide you with more things, they will come up at the point that you're supposed to deal with them.
Yeah.
If they never come up, then you're good. And if they come up, then it's your job to be aware and to deal with those as they come up. And then I did the rest of my 4, did my 5 in a couple of sittings with her. And like the day that I went home from my 5, I messaged her. I'm like, shit, I just thought of 3 more. And she's like, great, start a new list.
Yeah.
Let's do a mini one next weekend. So it was a really cool.
Did you have like how much of that? And then the other thing you said earlier about having this idea that she was going to present you with this list of all your brokenness, essentially. And that was something that was on your mind. Like,
you mean like the 5?
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing that I found for me, I've really shifted between how I do 4 and 5 with people, depending on the person.
Yeah.
And that's just a personal choice based on my experience. I was unable to complete my 4 on my own because I was so blocked. I didn't see my part in anything, right? I couldn't even try to look at it from a new angle. I didn't really understand column 3. I just knew who it was, why I was mad, what it was, why was I afraid of it, who it was, how did I harm them with my sex conduct, how have I harmed other people? Like it was just very, a broken brain can't fix a broken brain.
Yeah.
And for me, it was so bad, I couldn't do that. So she literally she helped me end my 4 as a part of the beginning of my 5. And so depending on the person now, sometimes I offer to do their 4 with them, sit with them and figure it out. Sometimes I don't. But I, by this point, had bought in enough to my sponsor. Everything that she said, if you try praying, you're going to feel a little better. I tried praying. I felt a little better. I tried asking for something somewhat specific and was open to seeing that come into fruition in many different ways. And it happened within hours. So I had bought in to these things and I started to have the hope. So it was pretty easy for me to be super honest in my 5. I think that it's also a key to be able to, no matter who sponsors you, I don't care if you got 12 years, if somebody wants to change, like I'd rather take them through the book again, because that in taking someone through the book again, you're building that trust, you're building that relationship. The more honest you are, the better you are.
Well, and I think, go ahead.
So in doing that, I trusted this person entirely. And so they, in turn provided me with, here's where your patterns lie. Here's when this type of thing happens, this is how you react. This type of thing happens, this is how you react. And so she's like, do you see how you have all these different people here, but all these situations are identical? And she helped me really understand that that was the first time that I think, I can't say that I had an experience there. I felt much lighter after doing it. I never had one of those monumental experiences. Mine was the educational variety. But that was the start of the end of my reaction to life. That was the start of being like, okay, hold on. You're telling me that a lot of this stuff is on me, but you're also telling me that stuff that has nothing to do with me, how I feel about it depends on how I react to it. And so in doing my 5, the greatest gift I got is understanding that I am no longer allowed to react to anything. My job is to seek God and then respond. So learning how to stop reacting and learning how to ask for direction and then responding was probably the best thing that I learned how to do from the 5 process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were just talking about there when all these situations are the same. That's like kind of the part of the actor that captivated me, because as I was reading it in the treatment center there, it was like, most people are just like, they're willing to say that it's my fault a little bit. But we're sure others are more to blame. Yeah, and I was going through this really dramatic separation at the time, and I felt like he was all to blame, and there was no way that I was taking any blame in any of that. And then I got to a place where I'm like, okay, like I could have left earlier, or I could have, right? And it was like a very minimal blame. And I couldn't see though, like where I was to blame, like where I was, and it's like the depth. So I'm not going to get into that, but I could admit a little bit that, yeah, I have some part in it because my relationships kind of seem to go in the same way. But it's mostly his fault because da 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 da. And then it says,
we're good. My brain thought it was an hour ahead of where it was.
like, whoa, time warp.
Proceed.
But yeah, so it's like, but then what happens? Well, he usually stays sore. And I was like, but why does he usually stay sore? And I just envisioned, I had like a cartoon image came to my mind, and it was like, well, because he keeps showing up and doing the same shit because no one's telling him. He doesn't have any insight, so he never changes. So he just goes and he's doing the same thing, getting the same experiences over and over and over again. And so therefore that column 4 is the key to the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it was such a aha moment.
Yep.
And I like a spiritual awakening, I would say, in the sense that it was like boom, and I was like in it to win it, you know.
Yeah.
And I got stalled out again at the 6, but we'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, with the 4, you were talking about personalities, and my sponsor had told me when I was in Calgary here, and I reconnected with an old sponsor from Medicine Hat actually, and she gave me such a good like tip. She's like, in working with others, there's a part that talks about how you identify a prospect. And then when you do, you like get to know him and you really like gather all the information. What about his drinking? What about his family? What about this? What about that? And you really like do a thorough assessment, because that'll inform you of how to proceed. And like that little bit there, like, it's like kind of, obviously I should do that, but I never thought to, because I'm like, I don't want to get into the drunkalogue. But I found the value in it the first time I did it. Like after she told me, the next person I sponsored, I actually went through all the questions in that section where it's like, what was your drinking like? I would never ask that before. And I got so much information out of that conversation that, like, for example, she was talking about how she would like the motivation to drink was to be like to belong. And that was like not my motivation. I wouldn't say that I was like trying to have camaraderie with it. I was trying to get my anxiety down, you know, but she like really had a sense of belonging. And there was like a place like Cheers, you know, where everybody knows your name. And there was that. And then she talked about some of the questions brought out just this like deep sense of like worthlessness. And I stopped her and I said, like, worthlessness, is that like, what does that thought sound like? Like, are you saying to myself, she goes, I'm worthless. I'm like, really? And so I like, it was the first time that I heard somebody say that and in that way. And I don't know, like I would never put that in there as this person's self-talk. So like the way that I had thought that it was just from talking with her and like the amount that I knew her, it still didn't give me any context of to like the motivations, which showed me like the thoughts that she was having about herself in how she relates to other people, like always on the outside and always feeling like she's never actually in the group, even though she's in the group, but she's not. And looking at herself like she shouldn't be there anyways, because if you get close to her, I'm going to just let you down, and I'm worthless and don't deserve anybody to be around anyways, kind of thing. And it was like, I'm really simplifying it, but it was like a beautiful conversation. And it kind of was like, whoa, you know, that I took like really seriously, like all the way forward, because of how much information I got out of it and how much connection, which then informed, like by the time I got to the place where we're talking about, I had an idea already of how I could support her. And I had the conversation about like, okay, so we don't bail on the 4. Like, how do you want to do this? So here's the options. And so we ended up, she did it in sections, 3 sections, this person. And then like the 5, I was with her. It was like a 3-day 5 of like the last piece of it. We were driving around and just talking and driving because we weren't like getting anywhere. And there was a big resentment we were trying to unhook at one point, and we had circled back to it. And I said, we're not going home until we've like found the hook here. And it took us a long time, and we ended up parking outside of this like gas station, and yeah, it was pretty incredible. And it all started, I think, like by the way that it was set up at the beginning, because the connection was like so much different, and maybe not how it would have been, because I don't know, I just couldn't believe that she seemed so confident. And so I really it changed the whole thing, that beginning of taking the time to actually explore the drunkalogue.
Right.
And what I never would have done because of how we are in meetings, and that's not something that I want to even explore, but the value in it was a lot. So that's something that I've like built in, I guess. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If you want to simplify it to one thing, it would be that it's just a case by case.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Look at us. We're getting through stuff here. Should we move into the 6 part since we're already talking about 4 or 5?
Yep. So like to conclude 5, let's just say it doesn't end with the list. It doesn't always end with the list, but I do think that we should mention that there's 2 types in the book of like people who don't want the list, and those people, they need to be like encouraged, and like an honest humility of like, you have to like point out some good things and bring them up to a level that they can carry on. And then there's the ones who you need the list.
Right.
And you need the list, and you need the list again.
Well, and it's funny that you should say that, because what a great way for me to kind of bring that all back from how it was taught to me. Have you ever heard of the apple business analogy? I love analogies.
No.
So I found it really, really effective. So when I start reading the beginnings of 4, talking about the inventory, I was always taught that imagine your brain, your life, your soul is an apple business. So imagine you have a stand of apples at a farmer's market, and you have a bunch of beautiful apples on this side, but on this side, you have a bunch that are rotten. So then, like when I do book studies and stuff, I ask people, I'm like, what happens if you leave them there? And then some people will throw out information. Ultimately, if you leave a bunch of rotten apples there, they infect everything else and it spreads. Right. And then I was like, okay, what happens if you remove the rotten apples? They're like, it stops infecting everything else. And I'm like, it does. But it also makes room for much better, more beautiful apples. So I'm like, this is how I want you to view this experience of the 4-5. It's not trying to show you how shitty of a person you are. You have so many beautiful qualities, but these little things that are broken inside how your brain thinks, they're rotting everything else. Once we pinpoint those, learn how to get rid of those, you're going to fill them up with much more beautiful ways to live your life. I'm not saying you don't have great qualities. You have tons. I'm saying that these, few things are making it really hard for everything else to bloom.
Yeah.
And people seem to really, really respond to that. I just love analogies.
I like the apple analogy.
Yeah.
I talk about like the zone. So I guess like if you have a defect and you get rid of it, I sometimes talk about like how can you get rid of it so that it's like in the zone and becomes an asset, because I think that most of the defects, if not all of them, can put them on a continuum. And over here you have like let's say courage. You need courage. You need it in your life, or you're not going to expand. You're going to just be in this comfort zone. And then you're going to have, what would we call it? Cowardliness. So we're just not doing nothing. So then courage is the zone. Because if you take that too far, then like you're running into a burning building to save a piano.
Right.
And then it's not courage at all. So like to build people up with like, okay, this defect can serve you in some ways if you get it into the zone. So if you're like really shy, then that can be really helpful, because you probably have a gentle personality, and that can be like something that is comforting for people. Like you can move a defect into the zone. Doesn't matter what it is. If you channel it properly, it can give you something positive. But so that's like my equation, or my equal to getting rid of. It's like when you get rid of it, put it into the zone and see where it can be beneficial. But like we talked about, this defect being removed thing on my time. I'm not convinced that that's the case at all. It's that I want
mean,
it
it
removed.
says right in there that God does it, not us.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day,
yeah,
it's like I just have to kind of do what it says, and sometimes I've heard this whole thing of our defects are there sometimes for a reason that's for the greater good. And I can think of a couple of examples that that might be true. Like somebody who is really egotistical. If I watch that and they're doing like all kinds of things on social media and they have the audacity to say all these things like with no filter and no, and I'm like, I wish I could do that. You know, like I sometimes do. I'm like, I wish that I could be like that confident in what I'm doing and saying that I would just be do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like when it's taken too far, it's pushing people away and causing judgment and making resistance, and you know, and then it's not a good trait. But
right.
I think like that confidence can be there if you toned her back, dialed her back with some humility, right?
Addicts are not great with toning back ego and toning into humility. We normally have to be hit pretty hard before we have to be shoved a humble pie right down our throat to get the hit sometimes.
Yeah, like a bunch of teenagers.
Right? But, you know, like what a great explanation of why step 6 is so short in the book, right? Because step 6 is a lived experience of every single part of your day, right? Step 6 is, you know, working with God provides us opportunities to grow into the people that we were always meant to be. Not always easy. Like I know for myself, there was a bunch of times where like I lived in a defect for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it wasn't until it affected me very greatly that I would be like, what's going on? And then trace it back to this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, that's how it all started. Right. I still have quite a lot of, I have defects I'm aware of now. I have defects that God has removed, and I have some that I still have absolutely no knowledge of. Like it has to be pointed out to me. But it is just kind of one of those things. It's a list of consideration all the time that God's your director and try to grow into that. But I will share with you, because this happened the other day, and I was waiting for the right platform on how to explain this, and it popped in. So this has got to be on the show.
Let's do it.
The depths, the sheer depths of which my people pleasing goes has brought me, like, I can't not shake my own head at myself and be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? It happened when I was in Belize on vacation, and I thought about it. I'm like, what a great thing to talk about, because, and I talked to a sponsee about this the other day, and they're like, I thought I was the only one that thought that way. So I hope this is helpful for people. I thought about it in Belize. I'm like, I should really talk about that. And then it just slipped my mind, and then it came up again. So here we go. I will say that uncomfortable conversations, confrontations, all of that stuff, that was all on my inventory. That was all stuff that I was terrified of doing. I had to ask God for courage. I had to be willing to step out of my comfort zone. I had to know that people meant to be in my corner would react decently to this information. It took me a lot of prayer, a lot of action, a lot of willingness. It took me a lot of stuff to get good at having uncomfortable conversations. I'm much better at it now than I was. I still struggle sometimes with my partner. I think there's underlying fear that if I say the wrong thing, he'll suddenly stop loving me and leave me or something. But like, I can still have them though. Uncomfortable stuff. I've learned how to do this. Hard conversations, sometimes life-changing conversations, hard fucking conversations I've learned how to do. But Janine, the depths of which my people pleasing for the stupidest shit. 3 months ago, I went to see my massage therapist.
Yes.
And she asked me if I wanted the table heater on. And I said yes. And it got too hot. And my brain went, I'm actually uncomfortably warm now. So then my brain followed that up with, you should probably tell her that you want it off. And I fucking spiraled. And my brain just went on this tangent of, she's in the zone. She's doing her thing. You don't want to bother her. She's not even anywhere close to the switch. Like, why would you interrupt her when she's trying to do her job? And then my brain on the other side, because I have gained some emotional intelligence in working the steps and working with God, was like, I think you're overthinking this. And I'm having this dialogue in my head being like, I think you're overthinking this. I think you should just say, I'd rather have it off. And I fought myself the entire way. And I said nothing. The next time I go in for a massage, do you want the table heater on? Nope. I'm smart. I'm just going to learn how to cut this all out. Halfway through my massage, I'm like, well, fuck, I'm cold. Well, I can't tell her to turn it on. And the dialogue continues. The next time I go in for a massage, she's like, do you want it on? And I was like, yes. Same thing happened. At the end, I got up and I'm like, oh my God, that was roasty. And she was like, oh, like, why didn't you just tell me you wanted it off? And what a perfect learning experience. I quickly prayed. I asked for courage and I was vulnerable because I can do the uncomfortable conversations when I'm mentally prepared. And I said, I have this thing and I understand that it's silly, but sometimes I really struggle asking for someone for something simple because I think that I'm being a worry or a bothersome. And like, it's one of the main reasons I couldn't reach out to my sponsor for the first 2 years whenever I needed help. I felt like a burden. Mm-hmm. And so, bless her heart, she was like, you know, this whole hour is for you, right? And I was like, somewhere in my brain, yeah, I know that. And she said, okay, if you ever want me to turn it on or off, just say something. Mm-hmm. Like she reassured me and gave me that. And I said, permission I said, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then I went on vacation. I didn't see her for like 5-6 weeks. So I went for a massage on the weekend and the table heater's on. And then all of a sudden it played out in my head, the exact same scenario. And then I started to get mad at myself because then I'm like, she's already told you it's okay to say it. Just say it. Just open your mouth and say the words. It's so simple. And the other part of my brain was just like, but I know better. Yeah. I have been reassured better. I have been told better. But the depths of which this fucking thing is inside me, I couldn't. I did it. I'm happy to report I did it. But I did wait 10 minutes longer than I wanted to. I waited till she walked to the other side of the table. So it was convenient for her. But I still said it. And she was like, oh, yeah, no problem. And then she turned it off and carried on with the massage. The other thing that comes up in my brain was when we were driving in a rental car in Belize, I had to pee long before I said something because my brain went, they know where we're going. They know how long till we want to go there. I haven't seen a gas station in a really long time. I don't want to have them get off the highway to go find me a bathroom. And I'm like contemplating all this ridiculous shit in my head. And then we come up to a fucking gas station and I said nothing. Nothing. And I'm just like, and then finally it was like code red.
Why did you say nothing at the gas station? Because was the dialogue?
I knew that we were trying to get somewhere. And I said, I don't want to bother them. I can probably hold it. Like, even though it's right there, like I'm just be like, I know we're trying to get somewhere. I'll just hold it. It'll be fine. I don't want to interrupt their schedule. Like just the stupidest shit. And then code yellow happened. And then I was like, I really have to pee. We have to find this right now. And their response? No problem. Let's Google it. They had done their own on different days of, hey, I got to, like, it's such a simple thing. I just find it hilarious. I'm able to look at myself and laugh at myself like, this is not something that I want. This is not, sometimes we talk about what defects are you not wanting to give up. And like, there's certain things that have served you up to a point. Mm-hmm. I am very aware that I have this. It is a struggle. I do not want it. I ask for God's help constantly, and yet it's not I have no capability of removing this on my own. Like God is doing his thing and I'm along for the ride. And but I just like, these are the types of things that fucking hold me back. And I'm talking to you about minor shit. So for all the people out there that do this for the minor shit, you probably do this for the bigger shit. And if you're like me doing it for the bigger shit, that's one of the biggest things that causes resentments. Mm-hmm. Your inability to say what you actually think, what you actually want, what you actually feel is it. If you don't say something, someone's going to do something that they have no idea you don't want them to do. And then you're going to be fucking mad at them for doing it, but you've never spoken up. And I think it's hilarious that I've learned how to speak up in the hard ones. Mm-hmm. But the little shit,
Well, the hard ones have context.
I can't
It's
fucking
like,
get rid of it.
the little ones don't. It's like, oh, so for me, I can sort of relate to the feeling like a burden thing, and I had to look at like why that was happening, because I'm not sure it's from like inner child stuff or anything like that. It could
Me
be,
either.
but I think it's because I'm busy, and like when I get interrupted when I'm in a zone, it's like I have to switch gears, and I don't love it. However, I love helping people, and so it's like I equally feel the same levels of I love helping people. Call me anytime. But then it's like I'm busy, and then I don't want to, like, if it's not really, really, really important, I don't want to take you out of the zone.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I concluded for myself, in that I'm kind of projecting my own stuff
Yep.
onto the situation where other people are not the same, of like some people are not thinking in that way whatsoever. I've learned this from my mom, who she's like, I used to think she was toxic positivity. I have since Christmas switched gears, which is great, because like that was a running script for a long time. And she has a tendency to shove things along, and everything is just peachy keen and hunky dory and tickety boo. And they used to drive me nuts, because she wouldn't have like the hard conversations, and we lived in a distance, like BC and Alberta. There was a lot between us until just recently, until 2020, and she just moved down unannounced, and here she is. And that's right when I was plummeting. So she gets there, and then I moved to Calgary and left her back there. So she moved to Calgary, and it's been a interesting like 4 years with like learning from her, because I'm running with this belief. It's just a belief for now till it shifts again, but that she's my parent for a reason. Some spiritual groups say that you pick your parents before birth, right? And I know why I picked my dad. And then I'm like, well, why would I, there's got to be a lesson here. So I've really gone, like, my stepmom's Buddhist, so I've gone down this avenue for some of the things in my life that I just needed to make some new meaning with. And so I have been showing up as if I had something to learn, and it's really been something over the last year for sure. And she's had to hunker down and have the hard conversations, but I've also respected the fact that, like, it's my day job, right? Like, to have hard conversations. And so then having hard conversations about her stuff is like easy for me. And she's way back on her skill set. So I've had to really like acknowledge that and not bulldoze her.
Right.
And that applies to like everybody in my life, like to just pull back and understand that everybody's not just okay with like the random deep. It takes a minute for people to just kind of wrap their head around what I'm asking sometimes. And so I've done that for her, and she's really met me like halfway. And she's like, we've had some really good, like, conflict is an opportunity for connection and growth. Like it is, but we don't use conflict in the right way most of the time. But if you can look at it like that, then it really can like take a relationship to like levels that you would never think. And so we've been on this like little journey of getting to know one another, I guess. And so this Christmas, my stepbrother came down, and he was very difficult, and it kind of put a cloud over Christmas. And my daughter was like, oh, that was not good. It was like rushed and dark, and we didn't get to visit, and there was like this vibe. And I felt the same way. And then my mom came over for Christmas the next day, and she was just so sweet. And she brought these like things from the dollar store, but they were like all individually wrapped. And I remembered her like doing like little treasure hunts growing up. She always buys like the best cards, like, that she really read that. And that's something that I took on, and I've always done that for people and for my kids and stuff, and like kind of like a tradition. But I just got this like appreciation, and like I just thought, how dare I think of this as toxic positivity? Like, I need more of that. And so like, I really have like, she's shifted positions now where I aspire to take some and be like more of that positive, like on purpose, because my vibe can be like kind of not that, but it's not that I'm that way. It's just that I'm not that way. It's like, I'm not like communicating the things that I feel. And I don't know if that's a fear thing or if it's like I'm busy and I think it's that, going back to that, like I want to be more thoughtful because it really means something. And I like, for example, she'll say things like I like your sweater or whatever. I'm like, do you though? Like why does that matter? And I just, it would drive me nuts because I'm about action and not like just saying the things, right? Like, show me. And that's kind of been my hard angle that I take it with everything, is like, show me. And so I don't communicate to people as a result of that, because I'm like, don't you see me doing all these things? You know, like, and Acadia said too with her school, she went back to college and she's like, Mom, you never say I'm proud of you. I'm like, yes, I do. I'm like, and then I was like, I guess I don't directly say that. I say it in all these other ways. But she really was looking for like words of affirmation. And that used to be something that I'm like, that's the most useless thing. I'm like, why? That anybody can, it's hot air. It's like, show me, I guess, because I'm in the rooms that it's like, we don't do good on hot air.
I am such a words of affirmation person.
Are
though.
you?
Oh, yeah. If you tell me that I'm doing a good job, I will strive to continue to do better.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I'm getting this. So like,
everybody's different, right? Like, that's why, you know, everyone has different love languages and stuff. But like, when Chase and I had a hard conversation right before we really kind of committed to each other, I told him, we talked about our wants versus our needs. And I said, you know, I want a lot of things, but all I really need from you is to match my effort and reassure me.
Yeah.
Tell me you care about me. Tell me you're not going anywhere. Tell me when I'm doing a good job.
Yeah. See,
right.
Like
and match my effort in the relationship. That's it.
It's changed the way that I look at myself, because like, and going back to why I brought this up at all, was that when I'm doing the whole, I don't want to be a burden thing, I think of my mom and I'm like, okay, but she would like me to call and she wouldn't look at it that way. And like people, like not everybody is thinking that, oh, I'm so busy and my phone's going to ring, and I love to help people. So why wouldn't the person want to just do a good deed? I'm wrecking the karmic exchange of like people having positive interactions. And anyways, I will just do the thing, because I say to myself, everybody's different. Like, not everybody is thinking that or feeling that, and they would appreciate.
Well, and I think that's kind of how our defects form too, right? Given that I had such a hard time in school and I was bullied and lots of people spread rumors about me, I never had words of affirmation. Right? Maybe from my teachers, but at the time, the teachers weren't the ones that really mattered. Right. Which is what instilled the, I need your validation. I need your approval. So when someone gives me that, I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. That's all I've been wanting to hear. Thank you. Oh my God.
Yeah. Like that one I'm like getting my head around, because I always think that when people are saying things to me, they're just saying it.
No.
I know. It's the whole thing about turn the heat off. So have you and Chase done the love languages?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had a conversation around it. And I'm a few. So I'm words of affirmation, quality time, and physical touch are kind of mine. He's like all of them. Yeah. I literally, we talked about it and I was like, here they are. What do you think? Like, what do you think? Yeah. I know what I think. What do you think? And he had explained that he never got any of them growing up from where he came from. So he's like, I can't say that I've never met anyone who's like, I actually lean towards these 2 or 3. Like, he's all of them. So
you were right when you said, I'm just connecting something here, when you were like, I think that's the defects, because I was thinking when there's couples counseling, that's a good assessment, because if I say, here, do these love languages in the assessment phase, it'll tell me exactly what's going on. You're not helping her out at the house, right? It'll highlight the deficits. And then a year later, after they've done a year of counseling and they've been working on their relationship, and then you say, okay, here, do the love languages. They'll be different. They'll just highlight what's lacking in that moment.
Well, and it's interesting too, right? Because like acts of service is one of them.
Yeah.
And like I see this often between him and I, which is quite funny. So we don't have a dishwasher. It makes me very upset. So I made cupcakes for one of the fellowships I was taking my birthday at, just constant cooking and things. We just had a lot of dishes over this past weekend. And so I wouldn't use the word argue, but like I'll start the sink and then he'll be like, "Oh, hon, you don't have to do, like I'll take care of the dishes. It's fine. Like I'll do it." And then I was like, "No, like it's totally fine. Like I'm already doing it. Everything's fine." And I really see like, so even though he's off to work quite a lot and only home on weekends, I see this as a love language for him of me being like acts of service. I recognize that you're being present, you're doing all these other things, so let me take care of this thing that's very small. He, on the other hand, maybe not necessarily the love language, but my needs that I've specifically told him about is I just want you to match my effort. So when he's home, he tries to match my effort and tries to do as much as he can around the house in the 2 days that he's home as the whole week that I'm home. And like it's this constant thing, but like it's really cool to have a partner that understands how you think and feel and is open to talking to you about that stuff. Sometimes he still has to reasure me, and he's like, "How many more times do I have to tell you? You can just tell me how you feel. It's fine." I get like anxiety.
You're like, lots, probably forever.
I finally made it through asking him an uncomfortable conversation without crying for the first time ever. And then I tail ended it by being like, "Aren't you proud of me? I didn't cry," and started to cry when I said it. So close. Maybe
Was he
next
proud?
time. He smiled. He thinks I'm silly sometimes. Like it was literally just like he had picked in his mind kind of a date he wanted to go on vacation next, and like I didn't think it was going to work, but it came up a couple times. So I'm like, I'm going to have to tell him I don't want to go then, and like just I think he's on the phone telling someone about next time we're traveling, and I was like, but I don't want to go then.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to talk to him about it. I'm gonna have to disappoint him. Maybe I'll make him angry. And my heart started to race and it started to pound. And then he got off the phone and I'm like, "God, please help me." And I was just like, "Babe."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I don't want to go to Thailand in January." And he was like, okay, why? And I told him why, and he was like, "Oh, that's fine. You didn't tell me."
Yeah.
And sometimes he likes to emphasize that because he knows that's one of my things. And I'm like, I know, I'm working on it.
Well, that's like the process of it. And that's also like kind of a direct correlation to like self-esteem, where in like psychology, there's this thing called self-attribution theory. And it's when you do something, you get a result, and then you attribute the result to yourself. And so like with the defects, you've been doing that the whole time, not just you, but people do that, where they don't take action and then they have a result, right? Like it's like, I didn't say anything and now we're still together and nothing happened, so I'm safe. And then you're attributing all of this to yourself, and your character is becoming this.
Yeah.
And like the character defects, it's like you don't even realize it's your character, and it's not actually your character. It's the brokenness in the way your
survival techniques, your coping strategies. Yeah.
And then so you're doing okay, I have the fear, my heart's beating. I got to tell him that I've got to change the date on the vacation. You do, he's good, and then you get a piece of you back, the real authentic you. Your authenticity is coming back. And then eventually your step 6, where you're doing it just out of the pain and the fear of like going back to how it used to be. And like, you have to, but the pain's motivating it mostly. And then sometime, and who knows when that invisible line is, but it becomes like, this is just way easier than doing that. And then your 6 becomes a 7. Well, like, I mean, when I first heard you work your 6 through 10 and it becomes 7, I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? And that's what it is. It's like,
okay.
It's like
yeah.
We work our 6 through the process of a 10.
Yep.
And then as a result, eventually it becomes, we're just doing it we're seeking humility as just the thing to do, because we've seen that this is the easier, softer way all along.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Like, yeah. And it just, you become convinced that this way was going to fail you all along, and this is the easier way. And boom, we're in 7. But it's not so boom. It's like a bunch of
not so boom.
then we're
Well, and I think there's also something to be said for, like, I didn't even take this into account until I had Alex on here to talk about amends, but he talked about like another reason why 6 is so short and 7. He said, if you really want to be shown where your defects lie and where these things come from that cause you to harm people, go talk to all the people you harmed. Doing 8 and 9 is really going to influence your ability to understand 6 and 7. And therefore lead you to the 10, right? Yeah, exactly. The action behind all that stuff. Yeah.
When I did my amends with my daughter, she's 20 now. And so she was like really around for it, like more than probably anybody. And so she was really mad. And like, she told me, she's like, if you didn't stop drinking, and you ended up homeless, I wouldn't even go see you. And so she was like really, really hurt. And so the repair has been like, we're good now, but it wasn't just overnight, and it wasn't just one amends. It was like a series of small little things, just like we would do on like our 4, where we do like, we get what we can take and we get what we can see at the time. And then, you just like kind of keep going that way. And so like with the family afterward, it's like, we can't rush that because it took a long time to get over here. And then you now got to rebuild your trust here, and you got to really let that happen. So the ego wants to go out and feel better and to stop, like, just I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I finished treatment. I did that, and rush it, but that will not get the results. And I really saw this, and I listened to what I was being told about not rushing, and it made sense to me, but it doesn't make the same sense until you go through it, right? Like, it's like, it makes all good sense.
Yeah.
I can read it on paper and be like, oh, for sure. But then when you're going through it, it's like, oh yeah, like I totally see what the mechanics of this and why.
Yes.
And so we get to the end, and I feel like over the 2 years, it was a little over 2 years when we were having conversations and things were happening, life was happening, conversations were happening. And then I finally like had the close conversation, which was like intentional to ask the question. So this was the only time that I said, is there anything else? And so the conversation was kind of like, we've talked about a lot of stuff, and like we've covered a lot of ground in various ways. And like I'm just wondering if you have anything else to like talk about. Like, are you mad about anything else? Like, and she's like, is this like the sorry thing? And I was like, yeah. And then she's like, you didn't even talk about the thing I'm mad about. And I was like,
what was it?
What? And do you know what it was? The lying. That was like the thing. It wasn't all the things that I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't bring up all those other things. But no, it was, I never would have thought of that. And like, of course, it was the lying. Like, of course, it's like, 'cause she said it, and I felt like, duh. But if I wouldn't have actually intentionally asked, I never would have thought about that.
Oh yeah.
And then it opened up a bunch of conversations.
9 times out of 10, we're told we think it's something that it has nothing to do with, right?
Yeah. Well, and I wasn't like, I said, I told her, I said, I wasn't like lying to you. I was lying to me. So like, that's why an addict is so convincing, because they've got themselves convinced first. They're not going out to convince they're already convinced. Now they're selling it to you like it's the gospel truth, and it's very convincing a lot of the times because they are convinced. Right. So I like, it was a good conversation around like the delusional mind of a person on substances. Yeah.
Which is great, that one of the things that you put on there for one of the things on Newcomers want to know is how to make an amends to somebody that deserves it.
Yeah, like I think that we take our collection of information that we've gotten about that specific situation, and by then we can see that, you know, where we have been wrong and where we've caused harm, and hopefully we're willing to make the conversations. I think that they don't have to be rushed, but they have to be started. Like, there's always things that you could be doing off the amends list in the first like year, I think. Like, whether it's paying a quarter in the SPCA thing at Walmart because you stole, or whether it's like there's ways to pay it forward with that on your mind. But I always encourage people like do not do anything with the family, like except for show up, except for don't react, except for be like accepting of the criticisms coming your way, because you probably deserve them, right? Like they're going to be lashing out at you, and this temptation to fall into that, and after 6 months sober and be like, but you da-da-da, and then like combat, just let them release their things and try to hold space for it. Get your own support if you need to, but like get the trust, make sure, and then talk to your sponsor and before you go out and do that. And the timing, and like God will bring up just don't rush it. Let it be on God's time as much as possible.
I gotta be honest, I 99% disagree with what you just said.
Like 99?
No. Just the last thing that you said.
So like are we 99?
God's time? I really disagree with that. And it's caused a lot of... And
talk it through, because we probably don't. But
I can't tell you how many times I've had a person be like, when God's ready for me to make an amends, God will put that person in front of me.
Oh, yeah.
That is an absolute excuse to not do any action your own, which gets people into a lot of trouble.
Right. So you're saying like, God, why didn't you let me win the lottery? I prayed every day for for my whole life. And he's like, you didn't buy a ticket.
Well, and exactly.
Yeah.
And like, so that's my biggest thing with 9 is there's so much misinformation about 9. And when I went through really good, down.
Yeah.
Hey, you should probably do another 4 or 5. You're probably pretty loaded. Up, and down. Hey, you should probably do another 4 or 5. It was into year 3 that
like they don't push back on the 9 as much.
So it was into year 3 that I'm like, this keeps happening. And that's when I met Alex, or really reached out to him, and he was like, how are your 9s? I'm like, He's like, well, that, maybe that's why.
Yeah.
So when I started looking at 9 as life and death is when I started to get really serious about it, started to see the results, got really passionate about it. And there's just so many things. And I don't think it's anybody doing it on purpose. But again, one sentence can be taken totally a different
I'm glad
way.
You clarified it. Yeah.
The biggest things that drive me bananas, and I hear them all the time, are that when I'm supposed to, God will literally put that person in front of me. I believe that to be very untrue. You're giving up all willingness yourself to fucking go do anything. It says that we've done our utmost to straighten out the past. Have you done your utmost sitting on your ass waiting for someone to show themselves to you? Another big one is watching your motivators. I had
the guilt and the...
people using these, misconstruing these as a reason not to make amends. So I'll give you an example of how I mean by that. So I had somebody who was struggling with doing 9s, reached out to me for some help. And so they were like, well, I can't make this one. My old sponsor told me that my motivation is wrong. Therefore, I'm not ready to make that amends. And I said, I'm going to need more. What did you do? What happened? And so that she gave me the whole scenario. And I said, so let me get this straight. You're telling me that you're aware you fucked up. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, you had a part to play in this going south. She said, yes. And I said, you are ready and willing now to take accountability for what you did? She said, yes. And I said, okay. So the only thing that you're telling me is that you're hoping that this could resume the friendship. She's like, yes. And I'm like, do you understand there's a strong possibility that may never happen because of the action that was taken in the past? She said, yes. And I said, I'm trying to understand where your motivation has gone so astray that you shouldn't be doing this amends. And then she's like, well, I was specifically told that I was being selfish because I wanted to be friends with this person again. And until my motives were pure, I was absolutely not ready to make this amends. And I said, for anyone out there that does this stuff, I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong. That has not been my experience. My experience is that I become better. I heal. I grow. I heal other people for taking accountability for my shit. And of course, I hope it goes well, but I'm prepared for it not to, because I did a lot of fucked up shit to people. But I'm like, if you understand that you owe this person an amends, they deserve it. And you understand that you may not get the result you're looking for, to me, that's as pure as it gets. Fucking go.
Yeah, so like
go.
Where I was saying on God's time is that was something that I had to tell myself to not lose hope that there would be a day that I would be able to face this particular counselor.
Okay.
Yep.
A particular amends.
Yeah.
Okay. Not everything. Okay.
Yes.
Understood.
And so I really, really, really wanted to have the conversation, but because of I was a previous client and this was a counselor, this was like my first go around getting sober, where I was only sober for I didn't stay sober, I think maybe 2 years, and then I was back out and stayed out. But in that 2-year time, there was a counselor that was really helpful. And I was very rude in her workshop or the group there. And I felt very bad about it. It was a big one. It was like I really was offside. And, but I couldn't just go to the place. And there was so I needed to see her in kind of an organic way. And so it happened probably.
Can I ask why you couldn't just go to the place?
Because of counselor client relationships, my teacher said.
Okay.
So I could have, but at the time I couldn't have.
Okay.
In my mind, because that was the direction I was getting. I was so I certainly could have. There's lots of ways I could have done it.
Okay.
But at the time I was I can't do that because that would be so what this person the teacher had told me was that it would be a boundary thing where you're just showing up, and it's so there's other ways for sure I could have done it. But in that, at that point I was I'm stuck. And so anyways, she was high on my list, and I just was God will put her in front of me. And then later in school, we did a psycho ed where we went back to the provincial building and we did a tour, I guess, in school. And she was facilitating this experiential group that it was the maze. I don't know if you've ever done it, but you go blindfolded on chairs are tied together and you're following the string. And there's no way off the string. There's no exit. But you go around and you're asking the people that you come across. There was 4 counselors in the whole room. And when you find one and you're blindfolded, you go, is this the exit? And then no. And you just keep going until you finally ask for help. And it was such a profound, powerful lesson for me in that moment, because it just paralleled my situation. And I guess a lot of people who are not asking for help when they should, but how long people would go on that track.
I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah, just chairs tied together like a web, walking around blindfolded. Some of them were on there for more than 2 hours. And I was watching the last 2. And
what happens when you ask for help?
They say, you found the exit.
No shit.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And so while I was watching these 2 people going on, and I was man, this is low key embarrassing. But this girl was there facilitating, and it just seemed like there was a time to have the conversation, and I did. And it was such a moment, because now I was not there as a client, and I was there as a student, and
right.
We were having this experiential learning that was so relevant, and it was really incredible, and we had a really good conversation. And so that was that right? No, I could have went. I could have I could have sent a letter. I could have
But God said it's time for you to do this. Here she is.
But she showed up.
Because you weren't ready yet. Yeah, I get that.
And it was just a good moment. And so
I really relate to that in that context. I think my favorite most, if you ever want me to pinpoint a time where I knew God was there more than ever before in my life, it's when I was reading Step 9 with a sponsee. And I kept bringing up this amend I had not made yet.
Yeah.
Because I was I didn't know at the time. I was too fearful to make it. So I kept reading the book, and I kept being here's an example of an amend that I still need to make. And I proceed to explain the story and the context of how I ended up with money from a technical charity that never got it back. So my sponsee, and I've told 10 sponsees at this time, my sponsee just starts laughing. She's like, which location?
Oh.
And so I told her, and she started to fucking howl. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, so my dad is the manager there. and his wife is the treasurer of that location. And I was like, well, fuck. Like, now I have, like, literally, I was too afraid to do all this stuff, but God was like trying to throw it in my face. If there was ever a time, the time is now.
Yeah.
And it was just everything about that whole experience lined up. So I was terrified. I wasn't ready, but she was like, it all aligned.
Yeah.
So then we ended up going to a meeting. I outed myself and I said, like, I'm supposed to go make this thing, and ask me next time you saw me how it went. And then so we had separate cars. She came with me because she's like, can I watch you make it? And I'd never had anyone ask me that before. And I said, what do you mean? She's like, well, you just taught me 9. It would be really cool to see someone make an amends the way that you're recommending I do them. Can I watch you make one?
No way.
So then I was like, sure. Like, sure. So we're driving there. I know how to get there, but for some reason I was so in my head, I missed the turn. So she's there waiting in the parking lot when I pull in. She's like, where did you go? And I'm like, I missed the turn. And then I turn around, I saw the building, and just fear swept through my whole body. I felt so guilty. All that shame and shit came back, right? And I looked at her and I'm like, I don't know if I can actually walk in there. And she's like, it's okay, I got you. Like, you're not doing it alone. And I'm like, hey, like, I need a minute. And I looked up to this guy and I prayed and I asked for help. And then my sponsee giggled. And I looked at her and she said, hi, enter person's name here. God knew I didn't have it in me to walk in the door. So she was walking through the parking lot. And I turned around and I'm just like, oh shit. So I'm like, okay, it's happening. And I'm just, tears are welling up in my face. And I'm like, hi, like, I owe you an amends. Do you mind if I read this to you? She was like, do I know you? Like, you owe me an amends? I'm like, well, maybe not you. I owe this place an amends. And she was like, oh, okay. So I opened the letter and I was shakily reading it and I handed her the money and I was just like, my poor spotsy's watching me do all this. And I was just like, have I harmed you in any other way? No. Is there anything else I can do to make it right? And it was one of the most profound healing amends of my entire life because she knows an addict. She's dealt with that kind of stuff. She looked me right in the face and said, my sweet girl, you just did it. And she gave me a big old hug and just years of guilt and shame melted away. Absolutely melted away. But I think it's hilarious because my brain always gave me reasons why I wasn't ready to do it, why I shouldn't have to do it yet.
Yeah.
And then God was like, you've had enough time. I'm making this very clear that you should be doing this right now.
So we're talking about actually the willingness, because if you're willing, and you had said earlier around the faith thing where you were willing to believe, and once we are willing and we start looking, then we have our clues everywhere. And it's kind of like we're going through the forest looking for breadcrumbs. And all we got to do is be willing to look for the breadcrumbs. Yeah. And so I guess amends for me has been like that, where it's like, as long as I'm willing, then I'm going to do them when they come up if I can't get them done on my own. And I will really emphasize that timing on some of the ones, trust is a part of the amends preload. Right. So when people are building trust, I'm talking about it in the sense of this is pre-game. This is the first stage of the amends. And so we are making amends right now because people go, oh, I'm making living amends. I'm like, no.
That's so funny. I was literally just going, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was literally just going to say I have one more question about amends before we should move on because we are getting about half an hour away from running out of time. I was just going to ask you, what is your take on the term living amends?
Yeah, living amends is we're moving towards a real amends if we can. If the person's living, then we can usually move towards some type of better scenario than nothing and just going, it's a living amends. But
do you believe in those?
Let me think of, yes, I think I do if you're a person who has affairs, don't tell the wife or the husband and stop having an affair. Call that a living amends, sure, if that's what you want to do. But I don't think that a living amends is,
See, I disagree with that I disagree with that.
Like, you think you should go tell the wife?
No.
Or husband? Okay.
No.
I was like, Jen.
See, so the
It's like, I don't endorse this right now.
The book is very clear that no hard and fast rule can be laid. There's a few really good examples. Every situation is different. The book is very clear that it's not always better to tell someone something they definitely don't know. You can cause unneeded harm. But there's still action that can be taken. You can have a serious conversation, bring everything forth with the person that you're having the affair with. Like there's
I was saying this is ending and it's already done.
My brain just does not like the term living amends. It's nowhere in the literature on how to perform amends. We are told to do our utmost in every situation the best way we can. My issue is that people use that as an excuse
when I hear
not
it, I'm like,
to make amends. Right? And here's the thing. It's such a widely taught, widely learned wording. I used to teach it, even though it was never in the book, because I heard it, I used it, I did it.
What would be an example
of what?
Stop stealing. Stop
I had somebody come to me once and say, I'm not fully confident that I would have my full safety by making this amends, so I'm just not going to make it. I'm just going to live better. And so what's been explained to me, again, also in the Alex episode, was
a good episode.
Living amends is the bare fucking minimum. And that is literally you doing the steps.
Right.
Doing the steps, you become better. So you're just, there are going to be occasional circumstances where maybe an amends isn't right, but that's not for you to decide. That's not for you to make. It's your job to write it all fucking down and talk to your sponsor, talk to a pillar accordingly. Because there are going to be some exceptions, but I feel like this has been something that's been pulled into the rooms enough where it's becoming the rule, not the exception, right? Living amends, you become better just by doing the work, right? There's very few circumstances where you shouldn't go make an amend. Very, very few. It does happen.
So I guess it's like if I'm talking with someone, like I don't think I've ever given the direction to just do a living amends.
Yeah. There's always some kind of action.
They bring it to me and they're using that kind of language. I'll be like talking through it to push that away, like, okay, so a living amends, like, so what does that mean? And what is that? Like, I hear that often with family stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's one that comes up quite a bit is like, well, we don't, and we're just for all the reasons, right? But it's like, okay, so if you're going to be doing a living amends, that means you're actually like putting some effort towards an amends process. So like, what is that? Because it's more than just...
Here's a living amends that I made to my parents. I owe you too much money. Don't even know how much. Probably won't pay it off in my lifetime. But I am making a commitment to you today that every month moving forward, you will get something from me. Don't know how much, don't know how I can afford, but I'm committing to this. And every month for the last 5 years, I have given them money and I continue to make that amend and live that amend to them every single month that goes by. Right. And I think that there's a very large difference. Yes, making amends is not about saying sorry. It's about changed behavior. But one of the coolest things that was ever brought to me is I had a sponsee who just couldn't stop relapsing. Too happy, too sad, she was relapsing. That was a very big experience for me. And I asked for help because I'm like, how, now that I've gotten her back on track, she's sober for a couple of weeks, we've read everything, we've figured everything out to here. How do I recommend somebody with such little time make amends? Because the way it was always worded to me, my understanding was that you can't say sorry. You are supposed to show changed behavior. And that's how you make an amends, is show that you are now a different person and God willing, you'll never go back to that other person. So I said, how do I do that for someone that only has 2 weeks? And so, again, it was Alex that had just said, did you read Dr. Bob's Nightmare? Because like the day he got sober, he was fucking up and down the fucking street making amends to everyone. But you don't hear that as much. So then I'm like, okay, cool. So how does somebody with no time make a good, true amends? Like that, because everyone talks about don't say sorry. We've heard it 1,000 times. Show changed behavior. How do you do that? And so I found out.
And is that where the living amends comes from then?
I don't know. The advice that I gave her was when making amends to these people, tell them what your changed behavior is. Right? I realize I don't have very much time. I realize that I've done a lot of things, but I have a sponsor. I am calling her every day. I am actively working on the book. I am going to 5 meetings a week. I am doing everything that I can to ensure that I do not harm you in the future. And I want to understand.
These are the ways I harmed you.
These are the ways,
this is my prevention plan
right?
that I'm working on.
This is what I'm taking accountability for. This is what I'm trying to change. Is there anything else you need to tell me so I can help get through this process and give you some healing? And it was such a profound, beautiful thing that there's just not a lot of circumstances that I think that a living amends should
It probably comes from something like we were just talking about, like, okay, you living, don't say the sorry today because you just got sober last night. Like, live a few more days and do the things maybe. Yeah. But this reminded me of like informed counseling or informed consent and counseling. Like, there's times when there will be a new disclosure from the person that then you have to give like a kind of another consent, a round of consent before you go into a new area with different intervention. And just checking in, and you do that because it's like you're going into it like a deeper place, and you want to make sure that they understand what's going on. And so there's times when there's a need for that. And so sort of what you were saying with the amends is like, and we were saying it with new layers. We're just getting what we can take in the time. Like, there's layers to this stuff. The inner work that we do is it's not linear. It's like we're going in layers and stages, and we're there's depth to it. And so it's like, why couldn't a person at 2 weeks sober say exactly that with like, this is the insight I have today. This is the accountability that I have today. That accountability a year from now is going to be very different. And like, if it's somebody who's close to them, chances are the amends will look a lot different because they're going to be hitting the surface of like, I'm not going to drink anymore. And then the next round will be like, I'm not going to, and probably like a behavior, like a defect behavior. And then, the amends that I make now, it's like, I'm sorry that I was, and it's like subtle, like insidious stuff that it would have never crossed my mind at 2 weeks sober. But there's always things that you can be accountable for and show you're moving in that direction.
And I think that that's something that's hugely missed by a lot of people in recovery is, and it was missed by me because I used to reach out to people with a template. Hi, I've been sober for X amount of time. I realize that I may have harmed you. This is a really important step in my recovery. Could you offer me a little bit of time? And then I did all my amends of people that liked me, and then people that didn't like me stopped responding to me. And I reached out and I asked for help on that. And then as soon as I read it to them, it hit me. And I'm like, oh, well, that's because it's all fucking selfish. It's not about them at all. I think one of the biggest things that people don't understand is that amends is supposed to heal the other person. And in healing them, you in return will also become free. And I think that it's people don't understand that what a huge disservice that they are doing to the people they care about, where it's like, you've affected somebody negatively in 5 different areas and you've worked on 3 of them. So you're going to wait an extra 3 years till you've worked on these 2 before you make amends to this person that has deserved the amends from you the entire time. I made amends to my parents. When I got to 9, and then I was afraid. So I waited a couple of months after that. So I was sober about a year, and I made the amends to my parents. And I think that's something that's not talked about near as much as it should, is like, amends is not a one-time deal.
No.
Right? I made an amends for the things that I was aware of and the action that I was promising to take and that I had already taken to change. And that's great. I've probably had 12 conversations with my parents over the last 5 years where I've had to come over, sit them down and say, hey, I've come to the realization of this. And I want to let you know that I'm fully aware of this now. And I did not know that. And I need you to understand that I realize now that's wrong. Right? Like, there's been tons. There's been tons of minis.
Yep.
But what a painful thing to have to watch my parents watch me be sober for 5 years before getting a fucking amends.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the takeaway that I hope people realize is 9 is not for you. It's for all the fucking people that you hurt. It's to help them heal. And in helping them heal, you yourself will be healed.
And the willingness, I think that's like been the central point of like the do we do this? Do we do, well, we do what we're doing, and the answers are there if we're willing to look for them and carry on. And I think at the beginning of 9, before we close the loop and move into the last thing, you were talking about
we still haven't talked about any of the meeting stuff.
That's okay.
We got time.
The meeting stuff? Okay.
Yeah.
What was I going to say about the 9? you were talking about, I think, people who like kind of not stall out, but they like let up on the gas pedal of like,
I did that.
right?
Yep.
And it's like a few years in, and then it's not common. Like I think that like, well, Alex, we've talked about and watched this episode if you haven't seen that one, because that one is like so.
I learned so much from that.
So good. Like he's the amends dude for sure. But like, of course it would be that if you're stalled out that you would go into that, because what else is gonna, if you just take away like all of the book stuff and look at it from what would an amends be doing to a person? Well, it's going to be calling them into the scariest thing they're avoiding, which is exactly what we need to be doing. And so if you're sitting there and you haven't done an amends for a couple of years and you're just there off your list and we're living amends, I don't know, but if that's where someone's at, then what a good way to reignite the faith is to go like, wow, that's something that I pushed away and just like have let it be there because I'm afraid. And so what would it be like for me to actually call on whatever I believe in to help me to move through this and conquer this level? Because that's probably 15 levels right there that you're not going into, and giving yourself the benefit of going into the unknown and like taking the plunge into the fear and coming out with the next level of insight and the next level of character growth. And so I think that is exactly right. And of course it would be like a jolt to your spiritual life, because you're doing the thing in a major way, because that's all the stuff that you tabled it because you're too scared to do. So moving into it would be like a CPR on your spiritual soul.
Yep. 100%. Oh, I love talking about events. Okay. So we got about 20 minutes and then we'll lead into our end topic. So we'll try to keep this basic for our people. How to pick a home group and why do you benefit from one? How many meetings, and do online meetings count?
Okay.
How to pick a home group.
What do you
got?
Okay, I think that we'll just kind of extend off what we talked about last time. We talked about like how to identify one that is actually talking solution.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that we get there, and then I had maybe 5 on the list. So one of the things that I wouldn't have probably told somebody is like location matters, because when you get busy, if you're far from your home group, like when I moved, it's like getting there is like a whole thing. So if there's somebody, if that would make a difference to me if I knew I was staying somewhere, but I hadn't like picked a place yet, and my home group is what it is, but it's far. And so if there's a top 5 that I was to have today, I'd be like, okay, is there like one that's closer, that's like got kind of an equal thing, just so I could get there and not be disconnected, because when life gets busy and you're like kind of complacent, because I think I definitely go through times where I'm like not thinking about, I really need to get to a meeting. And when I do, it's not because I'm in pain. It's like I need to belong to my recovery community, because I miss it and I need to be there. And so being close is one thing that would have been helpful, but I chose it because I just had like-minded people, and I felt like I could see these people again and again, and maybe again before I was getting annoyed. And that's kind of where I was at. I was just like, everything's annoying and I don't want to be going to a meeting. So it was like, where is the least annoying place I could go? And that works, because it's like those are probably your people, and you're just too in self to recognize that you need to be there, and you will be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I think is so funny, and I think our home group has done a really good job of educating over the last, I want to say year, maybe year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 years ago, every meeting they say, if you're a home group member, we can always use your help. Please raise your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of people that raised their hands saying they belong to our home group that had never attended a business meeting, we would look around and be like, who the fuck is that guy? Right? And so I think what's really important, and like now you see all the hands raised, and like we have a very strong service body in my home group, and it took us quite a while. Like when I first came into it, there was like 8 or 9 of us, and now there's constantly over 20 of us, and it's been really great. But I think the biggest thing that maybe is misguided from treatment centers is they say like how important it is to go out and have a home group. But like, what is a home group? What is the purpose of having a home group? What is the whole point? It's not just this is the meeting that I like to come to the most. And correct me if maybe because I don't have the knowledge.
This is actually how I whittled her down to the 2 that I chose. Was how are they running these meetings?
Well, but that's my point, right? What does it mean to be a home group member? It means that you participate in how the meeting functions, which means you attend the business meetings.
And you show up and be of service where you can, especially at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And like you learn a lot you can definitely tell a meeting who has a good like structure.
Yeah.
And that feels like stable. Like for me, it felt like, okay, I knew what to expect, and and that meant something, you know, where I knew that it would just be a good meeting and there wouldn't be a lot of things that are unpredictable, let's say. And
I have a certain group in my head that I enjoy them as a meeting. I would never attend a business meeting.
Yeah, it's
too much drama.
There's a few, and it's like if you can have a well-oiled machine in the rooms where there's a lot of personalities and a lot of like decisions. Like I went to one that wasn't ours, but the other one that I chose, and it was very structured. We talked about should there be more applause or less applause for like 7 months.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that last time.
Yeah, and so and at the time I just was curious about how people handled themselves. It's a good aim. Because there's structure and there's like instruction on how to handle difficult personalities. And like I heard a speaker tape one time and they were talking about if you want to learn anything about anything, you just go to business meetings in your home group and you will like see how to handle people. You'll learn how to handle problems. You'll learn how to speak, how to public speak. He's like, it was called Everything I Learned in AA in the rooms. And and like I think there's so much truth to that. You see like people that are trying to do this thing and how is it playing out in the heat of the moment, because we don't get to see that.
And I think it's so important to see the types of things that are brought up. Some of them super crucial, some of them really important, some of them kind of not fucking relevant at all. But in coming and attending a business meeting, you get to see the shit that we talk about, right? Like we actually had just voted. We had our share time be 4 minutes for a very long time. And then I was one of the people that proposed that we bring it down to 3 to allow more speakers to speak. And then it was voted with some opposition, but it passed and we changed it. And then the next business meeting, we had somebody try to bring it back. But it didn't win the vote to do that, because sometimes you can get really enthralled in what people are saying. But like I really believed myself that it was important to have more message be. But again, that's one of the cool things about a group is no one decides something. You can bring something up, and if someone likes it, they can second it, and then you can have discussion and you can vote on it. But like, who would have thought, if you have never been to these types of things, that how long someone speaks is something that would be a topic of conversation for 30 minutes at a business meeting?
Yeah. Oh, it's the thing.
Right?
I think like in the same way we talked about like the sponsor-sponsee relationship being like the first like vessel of trust and like container for things that you learn to be safe, and like you can have your defects come up and the person doesn't leave or judge or they shouldn't, but that you can have a good experience navigating your defects within a safe place. And like that's the same as contending in the rooms in the business sense, is like you can like people pleasing. Like how many people in recovery struggle with that? Like, well, most of us play it out in the real time, and it's a good like practice environment to learn how to speak up and how to like have principles over personalities and like just how this stuff actually plays out, because it gets annoying.
And what a great place to start learning more about the traditions, right? And why they matter so much, and just kind of learning about all the things that need to happen to make a meeting effective and functional.
Yeah.
Love home groups. I love my home group.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other thing so meetings, how many meetings should someone
online
go to?
count?
How many meetings should someone go to and do online meetings count?
How many people? I don't know.
So here's my thing that thank God for the gentleman that was in the room that told me this information, because I think that if he hadn't given this to me as a gift so soon, I could have been victim to
the 90 and 90.
I fucking hate that term. I fucking hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it, because you are throwing an all or nothing at a group of all or nothing people. The 90 and 90 did not come from any single anonymous literature that I am aware of. Well, at least the one that started it all, and that's what I follow, is the big book. And I've read through Comes of Age. I haven't read all of the literature that comes from Alcoholics Anonymous, but I've read a lot of it. And 90 and 90 has never been in any of that shit. And I think that's a treatment center thing. So for anybody out there, what I was always told is go to as many meetings as you can in your first year.
Yep. Well, and what a recipe for disaster if you're the kind of person that's just kind of hoping you do 90 and you're good, and that should have done the trick, right? Which is why one of the reasons that our home group stood out was that it's makes a very clear statement of we don't get better by just sitting here. That's said in every meeting. It's
well, and that's just it. There's some people that go to meetings every single night and have for a long time, but they're very spiritually sick because they're not doing the stuff.
It's this is a 12-step program, right?
Well, and so
steps.
Let me tell you a story again of another gift that I was given, because sometimes we just don't have awareness, right? I was working with a service sponsor at the time who was talking to me about sponsorship and a couple other things. And I said, well, that sounds great in theory, but I have no fucking time right now. I absolutely can't take on anything else. I'm trying to avoid collapsing again because I burn out. And so he asked me for a quick kind of sum up of all the things that I was doing. And then so I'm well, my life surrounds around sponsees, work, and fucking recovery. And that's about it. And he was like, "Hey, what are your hours of work?" And he's like, "Hey, how many meetings do you go to in a week?" And I'm like, "I don't know, 5 to 6. And he was like, "Why?" And naturally, I'm like, "What do you mean, why?" Because I've been doing this since I got sober, and it's been working the whole time. And why would I change it now? How dare you? Why would that even be a thing? And he was like, "Stop being so defensive. Why do you go to 5 or 6 meetings a week?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I've always done that, and it's worked." And then I'm like, "Why? What are you trying to say?" And he was like, "Well, it seems to me meetings, he's like, you know what the purpose of meetings is, right? It's written in Bill's story. We meet frequently so the newcomer may find the fellowship that they seek. You don't seem like you're a newcomer anymore." I'm like, "Well, I'm not." He's like, "You don't really seem hopeless, broken, and desperate anymore." I'm like, "I don't think so." And he's like, "So I'm just saying, if you're telling me you can't sponsor more people because you have no time, are you currently being the most effective you can with your time?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I think that you could really learn a lot more from working with someone else privately than listening to 5 people talk for 4 minutes on step 4. Which is what you're going to get a lot of when you go to the rooms and go to meetings." And he's like, if you cut it to 2 meetings a week, then you could easily have 3 sponsees a week that you met up with. And I think that you're going to find your recovery comes a lot better working with someone one-on-one than sitting in a room and talking surface level about how to work a step for a few minutes. And I was like, oh, that's really, I should probably think about that. And now I only go to my home group, really. Occasionally I'll go to another one if someone asks me, or if maybe I had a really hard day, but I don't need to go to a ton of meetings today. I need to work with people constantly, because that's where the behavior changes. That's where the growth happens, right? So I think it's really important for people to understand you can sit in 7, 14, 21 meetings a week. You can sit as many as you want, but if you're not willing to apply the shit outside the rooms, it's not going to do you any good. Yeah.
Well, I was going to answer, you go to as many as you need at the time. And I think that at the beginning, in fact, I was talking to somebody that I met 3 years ago, and they were saying oh, I don't go to meetings hardly anymore because I've gotten into their cultural stuff, and that is giving them what they were getting in the meetings. And they said, but sometimes I go just to go to my home group and sometimes to connect with friends. And that's good. But at the beginning, he said, like, I was like 3, 4, 5 meetings a day because I was just trying to hang on. And so it's like sometimes life is life and you got to hold on. And so I wouldn't ever like give a number, but I agree with you completely that the best use of your time when you're well is not to be just sitting in a meeting listening to people talk for 3 minutes, unless the use of your time is to connect with your people.
Totally.
Because that's very important as well.
Or to also be a light for others that are attending the meeting, right? Sometimes I do attend lower attendance meetings because I want to be able to offer a solution on a topic that can help someone else who does need to be in that meeting, which is also an option. Do online meetings count? That's your question, so I'm going to let you answer that first.
I would say that they count. They count for...
Depends if you're paying attention or not, I think.
Yeah. It depends if your screen's on.
Right? There's a lot of people that I know that got sober and got this thing in the height of the pandemic when most of the rooms were closed.
Yeah.
I know lots of people that got well starting online. I think that it's just it's the same as anything. You can go sit in a meeting and not pay attention and talk to somebody the entire time, sit on your phone the entire time, and you can do whatever you want. But if you are cooking dinner and listening to it in the background while having a conversation with someone else, like if you're not paying attention, it might not be beneficial. But
I asked that one because of the treatment center.
Okay.
The girls at the treatment center are always like the ones that live out of Calgary. And if they live like in somewhere that there's not a lot of then they count, but they don't do the thing that being in a community does.
True.
So like it's like I always emphasize you can go to online meetings, but like if you're just going to online meetings and people aren't getting to know you face to face and you're not like in the company of other people and you're just like, because there is a disconnect behind like it can't be for the human connection because there's not. So like the sense of community isn't the same. And so yes, they count, and yes, you can get lots out of them, but it's like not going to give you the, like, especially in our city, right? Like the Calgary recovery feeling
totally
is like, you won't find that online. You have to like get into the community. And I'm sure we're not the only place that has a sense of community, but I think that wherever you're at, like a face-to-face in some way is like very important. It's like, how easy is it to disconnect?
Extremely.
It's like,
it's easy for us to disconnect being surrounded by amazing recovery in the city when we go through hard times, right? Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that's very well said.
So ready for
ready.
Ready. So after the last one, I was thinking, we just like covered so many things, and like this conversation too kind of has the same theme of life is existing in a gray zone in a lot of times, right? A case by case and a moment to moment, and we're using like the breadcrumbs and like our connection to something bigger than ourselves to guide the way with whatever we think that is. And like I listen to my intuition now, and I don't always know. And like one of the stories that I really clung to at the beginning was that farmer's story, right? Where do you know the story?
I don't think so.
Oh, good. It's like my favorite story to tell.
Hit me.
Okay. So there's this farmer, and he only has a cow, and the government owns his land and everything else. And all he has is this cow. And that's how he like has his food, and his whole life is based on this cow. It's a risky deal. And he's got a son. And one day the cow escapes.
I have heard this
and
story.
He goes missing.
Keep going.
And so they go looking for the cow, and the son comes back, and there's like all these other cow. I don't even think it's a cow, actually.
I think it's a horse.
That's okay. Yeah, it's something. The animals, they come back, and the cows are coming back. It's 5 cows now. They're all like in their little cow group, and they get in a fight while the guy's trying to milk them. And they kick him, and his hip breaks. And the villagers come around, and they're like, oh my God. Oh yeah, I forgot the villagers. The villagers come around, they're like, oh my God, this is so terrible. This is so terrible. It was so awesome when all these cows came, and they were like, tripled your wealth, quadrupled your wealth, however many, quintupled your wealth. But now this is terrible. And the farmer's like, is it terrible? I don't know. That was the same thing he said when they came around the first time, labeling the event as amazing.
Missing cow, yeah.
And yeah, so they're just coming around telling him what it should be. And he's like, oh, I don't know if it's that or this. It's like, I'm just going with it kind of thing. And so the son was in the wheelchair, and they said, like, of course this is terrible. How are you going to milk all these cows? How are you going to get done what you need to do? And he says, I don't know. And then the country goes to war and they overlook the son. So I just totally butchered that story. But the point of the story is that you can't judge an event on, like, the missing cow wasn't bad. It was good because all these other cows came along, and that wasn't really good because then it was bad that they broke the kid's hip, and then that wasn't really bad at all because then the war overlooked them. So, like, when you can really, like, lean into that, you realize how much you don't know, and how much you just need to just trust and just take it what it is and do your best in that moment and show up, like, in truth and love. And the rest, we don't really know how it's going to play out. But I know for sure that if I'm just showing up with, like, truth and love, that the chips are going to fall where they're supposed to be falling when it comes to me and my life and the people around me. And so I was thinking about all of this on the way home, and just about, like, the name of your podcast. And I was just like, I love that, because it's like, we don't really know. We just never know. And that
as soon as we think we do, we're in trouble.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's been such an anchor for me in the, like, very beginning, for sure, when things were happening. And it was like custody was taken from me, and, like, unexpectedly. And I was, like, torn apart. And then I was, like, told, like, you don't even know what the plan is. Like, what if you're not supposed to da 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 da? And, like, I had to get on board with these things and stop reacting to things as good or bad in the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they're going to play out. And the more that I learn, and this is true in, like, areas beyond, like, this is true in an academic setting, this is true in, like, the more you know, the less you know. And that's the place to be, because the minute you think you do, you're unteachable.
And the minute you're unteachable, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate that, because I'm not going to lie. The name of the show is incredibly entertaining for me for a few different reasons. It's very enjoyable. When this opportunity first arose and I was thinking about what I wanted to call it, I prayed a bit, and I just wrote down, like, a bunch of different names, pegged them off one at a time. There's so many recovery podcasts out there. I'm like, no, that name's being used. And I whittled them down to a few I liked and a few I didn't like. And I had two that I was in between, neither of which did I actually love. But I didn't know at the time. But I wasn't ready to pick one because I didn't love it. And so my boyfriend has a friend who's in a band who quite often comes down from the Edmonton area and comes to play shows. And so I had met him. I'd seen them a few times live at this point. And so we were talking about it. And he was like, oh my God, that's so cool. What are you going to call it? And I was like, I don't know yet. And he's like, that would be a sick name to call your show. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't know yet. And I was like,
yeah.
It was like God just, like, threw it in my face. I'm like, I love this. I loved it. And I was like, that's it. Like, that's it. I'm done. And where it gives me a lot of entertainment value today is sometimes I'll have conversations with people and be like, oh yeah, like, I talk about that on my podcast. And they're like, what's your podcast? I'm like, I don't know yet. And they're like, but how do you have a podcast if you don't know yet? I'm like, no, like, that's what it's called. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just this really cool, organic.
Yep.
I'm a huge believer in, like, do the best I can. And quite often things are presented in front of me at the right times. And this was he's just like, what a great idea for a name. And I was like, you're right. That is a great fucking idea.
It is. Yeah.
I love that it has kind of the tune to it of the student mentality. And, like, I come on, I try not to be too controversial. I try not to be too argumentative but I'm open, right? Like, you said a couple of things where I'm like, I actually disagree with that. And, no, I don't actually see the same way on that stuff. But I'm never going to say you're wrong. I'm never going to say I'm right, because that's ridiculous, right? I only believe that I know something because of the things that I've learned. It's, you can present me with things that I've never seen before. Maybe you can help me grow, change my mind. And I love the student mentality of it all. And knowing that we are just small little specks on like
Mhm.
this blip of this like recovery world in this universe. And like, there's so much to learn. And we struggle with ego. And when I think I know everything is when I'm in serious trouble. So yeah, I just thought it was a really fitting name for the episode.
Yeah, I love it.
For the episode, for the show.
Good, yeah. So I'm glad we got to end with that because I'm going to have to learn the farmer story one more time next time I'm back, and I'll give it a round 3. And it's not cows. I'm going to take that with me. It's not cows.
It was still good. The point came across.
We got
That's
the point.
thing.
So anyways, this has been really good. I think we made it through all the questions.
We did. I think there might be like a, maybe 1 or 2 hanging, but
maybe in a couple months we'll get together and talk about spiritual bypassing.
I'm totally in for
I
that.
know. It's like, it will take us a whole like hour.
Yeah. I usually end the show by saying, what are we going to talk about next time? And it's like, I don't know yet, but I think I do know. And I think it's going to be that. So
it'll be good. It'll be good.
Well, thank you very much for spending your afternoon with me. I appreciate you. That was awesome. For any newcomers out there, if there's anything you don't know, ask somebody. Grab a hold of somebody, grab the book, and get to work. And we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks,
girl.
Thanks, Jen.
Bye, guys. Peace.